Hey, everybody, and welcome to our Module 5 Scenario Tips. I am your co host, Janine, and with me, as always, is Nick.
Hello,
Nick,
everyone.
what are we getting into today?
Today we are getting into Module 5 Scenario Tips. But the best part about this module is that we are all here together, um,
Yes.
learning these tips together as one. So I'm excited, and I hope you all are too.
Yeah. So let's see what we're going to learn today. So today we are going to actually complete our first A-dime notes
Yay.
together. Let's
Exciting.
reiterate what Nick said. We are going to do this together. And we're actually going to be calculating enteral nutrition. The last 2 weeks, we've been calculating parenteral nutrition for our preemie babies. So this week is going to be a little bit different. But, in all honesty, I feel like, sometimes enteral nutrition prescriptions might be a little bit simpler, but that's just my opinion. And then we're going to be doing the same thing as we always do. And we're going to be comparing to our normative data, to our advisable intakes.
Mhm.
So let's get
Let's go.
started.
But before we do continue on with this slide, I just want to reiterate something very important, that enteral nutrition is generally thought to be specifically tube feeding, but
Yep,
that's not the case. Yeah, even I thought that once upon a time. But enteral nutrition rather, generally refers to any method of feeding that uses the gastrointestinal tract
yeah.
to deliver, part or all of a person's nutrients or caloric requirements.
Yeah.
So
So it
it can,
wouldn't just be like a gastrostomy tube. It can be a jejunostomy tube. It can be a nasogastric tube. A whole bunch of different slew of things.
and besides the tubes, it can include just a regular normal diet,
Oral
the
intake.
use or the use of liquid supplements,
Hmm.
wherever the gastrointestinal tract is involved, which separates it from the parenteral nutrition. So
Basically from the mouth to the colon.
that's the gastrointestinal tract. Yes, it is. Your professors would be proud. So with that, let's go ahead and move on and take a look at this advisable intake chart.
Yes. So again, this is our normative data. This is our advisable intake for a very low birth weight infant. So we have to keep this in mind throughout this entire video, guys, and keep this in mind throughout the entire assignment. This is basically what we are always going to be referring to. We always want to refer back to our normative data to use as a guideline and make sure that our premature baby is going to be meeting their energy and protein and fluid goals.
Mm-hmm.
And also, we are going to be using our Similac Special Care High Protein formula, and we're going to be using the 24 kcal per ounce formula for this. So as we have the actual chart on here, but remember, you can always look this up on the Similac website. It will have all of this exact nutrition information on there in regards to the protein, the sodium, calcium, vitamin D, the iron. They will have every single other nutrient as well. All the B vitamin, anything you can think of, whatever's in that formula, they have it.
Yeah. And these values are based off of 100 calories. So keep that in mind. So for every
Yes.
100 calories of the formula that is being given, that will include 3.3 grams of formula. So
Exactly.
keep that in mind. Okay.
All right, let's move on.
So this is going to be our first question. We're going to determine the nutrient delivery of a preterm infant formula at a volume of 120 milliliters per kilogram per day for a 1.2 kilogram infant. Now, like we just went over quickly, on the left here, we have our advisable intake for this infant, an infant of this weight class. And on the right, we have the formula itself. And we are going to calculate how much calories per kilogram per day, or protein, etc., all these nutrients that we are going to receive from this from this formula. And we are going to compare those values to the advisable intake. Okay, so we're going to see what this nutrition prescription is giving us and comparing it to what the infant should be receiving based off of the normative data. Okay?
Yes.
So we're going to fill this chart out after we do all the calculations. So keep this chart handy if you're working along with maybe one of those scenarios, because we're going to be filling it out here. All right. So the first thing we have to do, again, this is the same problem, is convert this bad boy here to a unit of measure that we can work with. Yeah. So we're going to convert the calories per ounce to calories per milliliter. So I'm just going to do it here just to save some space. But we have,
And again, guys, this is nothing new. This is our conversions. Remember that we are always building up from module 1 and onward. So
and how many milliliters are in an ounce, Janine?
30 milliliters per ounce.
Boom.
I honestly, you guys should have it memorized by now. I know I certainly do.
It's a formality at this point.
It
So
really
the
is.
ounces are going to cancel, and then 24 divided by 30 is going to give us 0.8 kcal per milliliter.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what we're going to be working with. That's what this formula gives us, okay? So the first thing we're going to do is see, based off of this volume here, how many calories are we going to be receiving per kilogram per day using what we determined, okay?
Yep.
So to do that, we're going to take the volume, which is 120 milliliters per kilogram per day, and we're going to multiply that by what we just found out to be 0.8 kcals per milliliter. Okay, so these are going to cancel out. And then 120 times 0.8 will give us 96 kcal per kilogram per day. Okay? And
Got
then,
it.
yep, easy. And then let's move on to the protein. We're going to do proportions here. So we know that with this formula, we're going to rewrite kind of the equation. We have 3.3 grams of protein for every 100 kcals.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, because that's right here. That's what's given right here. And we're going to equate that to x over what we just found.
Mm-hmm.
Because we want to know how many grams of
protein per 96 kcals.
Per kilogram per day. Right, exactly. So x grams of protein per kilogram per day over, what we just found to be 96 kcals per kilogram per day. Okay, and we're going to cross multiply. So here we have 100 kcals, 100x kcals times grams of protein per kilogram per day equals, we're going to cross multiply again. 3.3 times 96 is going to give us 316.8 grams of protein times kcal per kilogram per day. Okay?
Yep.
And what we're going to do now is on the left-hand side, again, we want to keep the x and the grams of protein per kilogram per day because that's what the x is really going to be signifying.
We solve for x.
Exactly. Nice, Janine. I see you. Okay. Making me proud. So if we want to keep the x, we want to get rid of the one. If we want to keep the x grams of protein per kilogram per day, we want to get rid of the 100 kcals. We're going to divide by 100 kcals. And you're all making me proud too because I know you're all learning, just like Janine.
Yes.
As well as
repetition is key, and if you after this module, you guys are definitely going to know how to do proportions.
that is a fact. And then once we do this, remember this is going to cancel, and we're left with x grams of protein per kilogram per day is equal to 3.168, and then the kcals are going to cancel. Grams of protein per kilogram per day. Okay, so that right there, let's just go ahead and round that to 3.2. And that right there is going to tell us how many grams of protein we're going to get based off of 96 calories per kilogram per day. Okay?
And at a volume of 120 milliliters per kilogram per day.
Exactly, at this volume. So I'm just gonna write this here. Now we're gonna move on to the sodium. So we're just gonna write this equation out again. We're doing just more proportions. A lot of this is about proportions. So we're gonna do the 1.9 MEQ, which is milliequivalents of Na over 100 kcals is equal to, again, x grams, or rather not grams, I'm sorry.
Milliequivalents.
Right. Milliequivalents of sodium per kilogram per day over the same amount of calories is going to be equal to, what are we doing, Janine?
Cross multiplying.
Cross multiplying. So that's going to give us 100 x kcals times milliequivalents sodium per kilogram per day equals this right here, which will give us
1.9 times 96 comes out to 182.4.
182.4, and that's going to be milliequivalents times calories per kilogram per day. Okay, and then remember on the left side, we want to solve for x. So we're going to we want to solve for x milliequivalents of sodium per kilogram per day. So we're going to get rid of that 100 kcals. So divide it by 100 kcals. Both sides.
Yeah, so it's going to be 1.8.
Boom, boom. Right. So x milliequivalents of sodium per kilogram per day. Going to give us approximately, let's put the right symbols here, approximately 1.8 milliequivalents of kcals are going to cancel. Sodium per kilogram per day. 0.8. Okay, so let's just go to the next slide to kind of get some space here, but just keep these numbers in mind. Okay. So we have the protein and sodium done. Let's do calcium. So what are we going to do here, Janine?
Proportions.
There you go. That's my girl.
All right, so then this is going to be 180 milligrams of calcium over 100 kcals. And then it's going to be equal to X milligrams of calcium per kilogram per day. We forgot that. Over our 96 kcals per kilogram per day.
What next? You took the reins. You have to finish it.
All right. Now we're going to cross multiply, guys. So it's going to be 100x kcals and then parentheses milligrams of calcium per kilogram per day. And it's going to equate to, let's see, it's going to be 180 milligrams times 96 kcals. So that comes out, it's a big number, but 17,280. Is that right?
Yeah. 17,280, and that is
milligrams of calcium
times
kcals per kilogram per day.
And
then we're going to solve for x. So we're going to divide by 100 kcals. Yeah. And then kcals are going to cancel out. Hundreds are going to cancel out. We're going to be left with x milligrams of calcium per kilogram per day. And that's going to equal about approximately 173 milligrams of calcium per kilogram per day because the kcals cancel out.
Beautiful. And since she's learning, it makes me happy because I know you all are too.
Yay.
And
yeah,
her
guys.
voice is a little smoother than mine.
Also, make sure that you guys are doing this along with us. Trust me when I say that it's very easy to watch Nick do it, and then every time I try and actually write it out myself, I end up confusing myself. So make sure you're doing this. Yes.
How do you do this again?
Exactly. So make sure you guys are joining us and actually writing these equations out. The more you write it out, the more you practice, the better you will get at it. We promise.
This is especially true for what we're about to do next, which is the vitamin D, which has an extra step that is very important. You don't want to mess it up because you will not get it right.
Yeah.
But with that in mind, it's going to start off the same way. So we're going to take what we have. Over how many calories? and equate that to X. I'm just going to do U VD.
Yeah, U for unit.
Yeah, U for unit. Just because otherwise I will run out of space. That's not even better. U per kilogram per day over 96 kcals per kilogram per day. And we're going to cross multiply again. So we have 100 kcals times units of vitamin D per kilogram per day.
Yeah, don't forget your X. Look at me showing you up.
What is it? The pupil becomes a professor or something like that. And then we're gonna, okay, so then we're gonna do the next round across multiplying, which is 96 times 150, Janine.
14,400.
400 units of vitamin D times kcal per kilogram per day. Okay, so we're going to again solve for X. Okay, all right, now with this, we see that the 100 and the calories cancel. So we're left with X units of vitamin D per kilogram per day on this side equals 144, calories are going to cancel, units of vitamin D per kilogram per day on this side as well. So normally we would be done, but like I said before, there is one extra step, and that is that we have to convert this into units per day, because vitamin D is actually reported as units per day instead of units per kilogram per day. So if this infant weighed 1 kilogram, then we would be done, because
1 times 144 is 144.
Right. So what we need to do is convert the 144 right here, this thing here, to units per day. And how do we do that? Well, we need to get rid of the kilograms. So to get rid of the kilograms, since it's in the denominator, you need to multiply by kilograms. And where do we get that? Well, we just take another look up here at the 1.2, and that's going to be our factor here. So we're going to multiply what we just got here times 1.2 kilograms. And then the kilograms are going to cancel. And that's going to give us a total of 173 units of vitamin D per day. So that's our actual answer. And funny enough, it is the exact same as the calcium.
Yeah, ironically.
Okay, ironically. So last, we are going to work on the iron. So it's the same exact process. We're going to take, you know what, I like the red, 1.8.
Yeah, leave it.
Yeah. It works with iron if you think about it. Milligrams over 100 kcals equals X milligrams of iron per kilogram per day over 96 kcals per kilogram per day. Okay, so we are going to cross multiply here, and we're going to get 100x kcals, I forgot the x, times milligrams of iron per kilogram per day equals 96 times 1.8, which is
172.8.
172.8 milligrams of iron times kcal per kilogram per day. Okay, so we're going to divide each side by 100 kcals because we want the x alone. And then these are going to cancel, these are going to cancel, and that's going to give us
1.7.
Thank you. Equals 1.7 milligrams of iron per kilogram per day. It's just so many units that it's so easy to get lost. I've done this I don't know how many times, and I just keep getting lost.
Yeah.
But you see me catching my mistakes, you'll probably see yourself catching them too if you make them, and that's just what learning is all about. So now that we did all of Yeah. Now that we found all of those values, let's go ahead and compare them to the advisable intake.
Yep, so that's what our number 2 is. So let's go ahead and see which nutrients we're okay in, which nutrients we're lacking in. So if we see, we started off with our volume at 120 and our advisable intake is normally around 150 for a very low birth weight infant. So already there, like right off the bat, we know we're very low. And then if we look at our calories are definitely low. Our advisable is 120. With this actual formula at this rate of fluid, it's only giving us about 96 kcals per kilogram per day. Our protein is a little bit on the lower side at 3.2 versus the advisable intake of 4 grams per kilogram per day. Sodium is low, very low, right? Like 1.8, and then it's supposed to be 3 milliequivalents. And then we have our calcium, which is a little low, but almost there, like kind of, but it should be around 180 because if you remember Dr. Abel always saying, and especially in all the PDFs, like we never want to really be under because we want to just kind of plan ahead for the premature babies and make sure that we're, So then we look at our vitamin D. It should be from 400 to 1,000 units, international units per day. And that's very low then because we're only at 173 IUs per day. And same thing with iron. So I think it's safe to say
we're low on all.
We're low on pretty much everything.
So now that we identified that, the next part of the question is what would we recommend to the NICU team during rounds? So I think there are two things we can do. We can either increase the concentration of each of these nutrients, all 6 of them, or we can increase the volume. What do you think is the best route?
Yeah, so normally, again, as Dr. Abel has taught us, what normally happens as a NICU dietitian, you always want to try and advance the volume first, unless otherwise specified. That's what we had said in the previous modules. So if the baby is on some, like for example, if they're on some type of fluid restriction and you're not able to increase the volume, then that's when you can go ahead and increase the concentration of the actual nutrients themselves and leave the volume as is. But in this case, we don't have any indications as to some type of fluid restriction. So our first approach is always going to be to advance the volume.
Yep. So then let's do that then. Let's advance the volume. And we're going to do quite a little bit more math because we want to figure out now with this same formula but at a different volume, how do the nutrients stack up? And as you can see in this slide here, actually, this new volume we're going to use is actually the advisable intake for an infant of this size. So let's go ahead and take care of that.
Yeah, so let's see what happens.
Again, and you know what? We're going green this time.
Your favorite color.
Anyway, once again, the first step is to convert this sucker right here. And if you don't know how to do that by now, take a look back, rewind, go watch the other modules, pick one random, you'll probably find it. Modules 3 and 4. So that's going to be 0.8 calories per milliliter. There you go. And the first thing we're going to do is actually check these calories based off of the volume that we are running this prescription at. So we have our volume. Per day. And we're going to multiply that by the 0.8 kcals per milliliter. And when we do that, the milliliters are going to cancel, and we are left with 120 kcals per kilogram per day. So it's going to be 120. Okay, and then now that we have that, great. We're going to move on to the protein where we do our proportions. So we're going to just write down this exact equation of 3.3 over 100.
Let's do some proportions.
If dietitian doesn't work out for you, I know your new line of work. Just go on to the next part. So it's going to be X grams of protein per kilogram per day over, this time, instead of the 96 calories per kilogram per day, we are going to use what we just found here, which would be 120, because again, this is the new calories that are going to be received by this infant based off of the new formula. So it's going to be 120 calories per kilogram per day. Okay?
See what that comes out to.
Yep. So we're going to do 100 x kcal times grams of protein per kilogram per day equals
396.
Thank you very much. 396 grams of protein times kcal per kilogram per day. Okay, then we're going to divide each side by 100 kcals because we want the x alone. Well, with the grams of protein, but we've went over that already. 100 kcals. Oops. So those are going to cancel. And then the calories are going to cancel, and that's going to give us a total of approximately 4 grams of protein per kilogram per day. The actual value is about 3.96, but we can
round up.
Round up for the time being. So it's going to be 4. Okay. So now same exact process for the sodium. So we're going to do 1.9 milliequivalents of sodium over 100 kcals equals x over 120. Thank you. You felt my mind go blank for a second. Okay, now we're going to cross multiply again. So we have 100x kcals times milliequivalents of sodium per kilogram per day equals this value right here. You have that for me?
Yep, 228.
Thank you. 228. Milliequivalents of sodium times calories per kilogram per day. There you go. And then we're going to divide each side by 100 kcals. Boom, boom. X. So is approximately 2.3 milliequivalents of sodium, because these are going to cancel, per kilogram per day. Okay, perfect. So Janine, I'm going to let you take the reins here for calcium once again because you proved to be so good at it before.
Let's do it.
So where do we start?
So here we have 180 milligrams of calcium. And we're going to do over 100 calories. And it's going to equate to our X milligrams of calcium per kilogram per day over 120 kcals per kilogram per day. And so now we're going to do our cross multiplication. So it's going to come out to 100x kcals, milligrams of calcium per kilogram per day. And then that's going to equal 180 times 120, which is 21,600 milligrams of calcium per kcals per kilogram per day. And now we're going to solve for x. So we're going to divide by 100 kcals on each side. And the 100 and kcals are going to cancel out. And then that's going to leave us with 216 milligrams of calcium per kilogram per day. Voila, we have our calcium.
Perfect. There you go.
So now we're going to do the tricky one, which really shouldn't be that tricky, but always remember that our vitamin D is going to be the only odd one out where it does not go by kilogram per day. It normally goes by the units per day.
We're going to start off the same way. So we have 150 units of vitamin D over over 100 kcals equals X units of vitamin D per kilogram per day over 120 kcals per kilogram per day. So we cross multiply here to give us 100 X kcals times units of vitamin D per kilogram per day equals this
That
right
is
here.
18,000
units of vitamin D times calories per kilogram per day. And we're going to divide each side by 100x to get that x variable by itself. Or rather, I'm sorry.
We're going to divide by 100. So we're going to divide by 100 kcals
Right.
on each side. So to solve for x.
So that's going to give us x units of vitamin D per kilogram per day equals approximately 180 units of vitamin D per kilogram per day. All right, where do we go from here?
So now we are going to multiply by the weight of the infant.
Right, because the units are in unit per day, not units per kilogram per day. So we're going to get rid of the kilograms here. So we're going to multiply the denominator, which is kilogram, the kilograms in the denominator, by the kilograms of the infant in the numerator. So times 1.2 kilograms over 1, technically. Boom, boom. That's going to give us 200 units of vitamin D per day. That's the answer right there. Okay. So I'm just going to actually erase all of this just so I have a little bit more space. But I know you've all been following along with me, so you have it on your own sheet of paper.
Yep.
Okay, so let's do the iron now. And we have 1.8 milligrams of iron per 100 calories equals X milligrams of iron per kilogram per day over 120, that's what we got up here, calories per kilogram per day. I'm going to cross multiply. We have our 100x kcals times milligrams of iron per kilogram per day equals 1.8 times 120, which would give us 216 milligrams of iron times calories per kilogram per day. Okay, so we'll divide each side by 100 kcals to get the x alone. And then these will cancel. So x milligrams of iron per kilogram per day equals 2.16 milligrams of iron per kilogram per day. And if we round that, that'll give us approximately 2.2 milligrams of iron per kilogram per day. Okay?
Nice.
And that's about it. So now that we have the nutrients that will be delivered based off of this nutrition prescription with this formula, let's see how they compare to the advisable intake.
Okay. Well, we're definitely good on our volume for sure. We already knew that to start with. And our calories are right on point. So is our protein. Our sodium is still on the low side. Calcium, we're good. And then our vitamin D is still a little bit on the low side. So.
And our iron.
Our iron is well within the range. So I think our iron is still a little bit on the low side from the range, but it's still okay. So we're good on that. So based off of here, what would we recommend, Nick?
Well, the sodium looks low, so we can somehow get more sodium into this infant. So maybe we can increase the concentration.
Or we can provide just a sodium supplement.
You think that would be better?
Yeah. So normally
probably,
that's
right?
what is normally warranted. Like you just want to add a little extra sodium. I mean, if you think about it in that sense, it's kind of the same thing. But the way that we would say is to just suggest both a sodium and a vitamin D supplement for this
Okay,
baby.
right. And maybe we can even take a look at the iron again. So like you said, the iron is pretty low, even though it's in that range, so it is kind of adequate. But that would really be based off of the labs. Maybe if the
Exactly.
labs don't match up to what they should be with those labs that iron impacts, then
Hmm.
we can take a look at it again. And if we're supply an iron supplement.
Yeah,
So,
definitely.
yep.
Definitely.
So there's something to keep in mind. So let's go on to
Mhm.
the next slide.
Okay. So our next question is to determine the postmenstrual age, percentiles, and Z-scores for both weights and determine the rate of weight gain. So remember, this is all stuff that we have already learned. This is in module 1, module 2, module 3. So if you need to go more in depth on how to obtain this type of information, please reference those module tips. But we are going to be explaining it very briefly here so that we can get on the same page. Let's figure this out.
Yeah. So before we go into the postmenstrual age and rate of weight gain, let's first tackle those percentiles and z-scores based off of the weights, off of the previous and the current weight.
Mhm.
So remember the way we did that was we went to PD tools
Yes.
and we chose the Fenton PD tools because they are not yet 1 month of age. So we
Mhm.
chose Fenton instead of the WHO in this case. And let's just go over a quick example of how to enter that data onto PD tools right here in the next slide. So
Yes.
here we have we entered the male, we entered the weight in grams, and that is
Yeah.
very important because the weight here is in kilograms.
Yeah. So
Okay,
make
so you
sure
need,
that you do that conversion. Just divide by 1,000.
yeah,
Move that decimal point.
always check and pay close attention to what it's asking because otherwise you're just not going to get the right answer.
Yeah.
So we're doing the previous weight first, so that's the weight there. Remember, we're going to skip the gestational age.
Mhm. The
Skip
one on top.
right, the one on top.
Mhm.
Skip these as well, and move on to the
Mhm.
date of birth, which we have right here. The
Mhm.
gestation of birth. So this is the one that we're going to fill in. Actually, we get that from right here. And like I said, this is the previous weight of the 1.9 kcals, or rather kilograms. So we're going
Mhm.
to put in the 522 here. So
Yep.
that's the way that you should be um, adding it onto PD tools. And if Dr. Abel were to ask you for the head circumference or the length, then you would include that here as well in centimeters. But for now, we're just going to look at the weight. Okay.
Mhm. Exactly.
So once we have this information inputted in this manner, go ahead and press submit, and you're going to receive a percentile and z-score based off of this data. And go ahead and jot that down. We're not going to jot it down just yet, but in just a moment we will. But just
Mhm.
make sure and jot it down for yourself, own information. So let's move on here. This is the same exact format. This
Mhm.
is just a rather the current weight. So like I mentioned before, the weight is in grams. This is 1260, and
Mhm.
that is the current weight, and this is the current date here. So this is just another example of how you're supposed to enter it on PD tools. So as you're going along with us and doing it yourself, just
Mhm.
double check that the way you entered it is the same as we did here, and
Mhm.
that this part right here is left blank as well as these and these. Okay.
Mhm.
So again, take note of the percentiles and z-scores, and now I will go ahead and fill those out here. Okay, so for the previous date, we were at the 22nd percentile with a z-score, that's an ugly,
Was it? It
of
came out to.
negative 0.78.
Mhm.
And for the current weight, we were in the 24th percentile,
Mhm. A negative 0.72.
negative 0. Thank you. Okay, so we are kind of low here
Yeah.
on both ends, but remember, they are a premature infant, so they
Mhm.
are still gaining weight to the best of their ability, and they're actually not that much older than their gestational age. It's only been about 2 weeks. So they're still fighting, still working hard. So now that we have those percentiles, let's go ahead and calculate the post-menstrual age.
All right,
And
let's do it.
Yep. And we're going to do this based off of the current date. That is 5/29. So to go ahead and calculate the postmenstrual age, the first thing we need to do is calculate the chronological age. So the chronological age is going to be the current date minus the birth date.
Date of birth, yeah.
Yeah, birth date. Okay. And that's going to be the current date of 5/29 minus the birth date of 5/13. Okay. And again, we've been over this in module 2 specifically, as well as maybe some before and after as well. My memory serves me correctly. And we are not actually subtracting these. These are not fractions. They look like fractions, but they're not. They are dates. So what we're going to do is subtract the months. So 5 minus 5 is, 0 months.
0.
Same month. And then we're going to subtract the days. Okay, so we have 29 minus 13 is going to be 16 days. All right, so the chronological age is actually just 16 days. That's it. But let's just as an example, I just want to go over something really quickly. Let's pretend it was 6/29 as the current date, and the birth date was still 5/13. Then we would subtract 6 minus 5, the 2 months, would give us 1 month and 16 days. Okay? And then the way we would get this age into days is take this month and determine, okay, how many days on the calendar are there in this month? But what month are we talking about? Well, we're talking about May.
Yep.
Because that is the month that they are overlapping. They're going into June. And there are 31 days in May. It's going to be 31 days plus 16 days for a total of 47 days. And we want to turn that into weeks and days. So we're going to divide by 7 days in 1 week. And that's going to give us 6 weeks and 7 days. And I know it's 6 weeks because 7 times 6 is 42. And then 47, which is what we have here, minus the 42 is 5. So it's 6 weeks and 5 days. But that's just an example. That's not the case here. But just in case anybody was still confused there, I just wanted to clear that up a little bit.
Thank you for doing that, Nick, because I know even I tripped up a lot trying to get that.
We all do.
It can be very confusing.
Right. Okay, so
we have 16 days.
Yeah, so that's our chronological age. So we're going to take that 16 days and convert it into weeks and days. So we're going to divide it by 7 days. And that's going to be, so we want to think about it in weeks and days, right? So we have 7 days in a week. 2 weeks, we have 14 days. So we're going to have 2 weeks and 2 days. So that is going to be the actual chronological age here in terms of weeks and days. So let's go ahead and calculate the post-menstrual age. And that's going to be the gestational age over here plus the chronological age, which we just found out. So we're going to do 28 and 2/7 plus 2 weeks and 2/7. And remember, these are not necessarily fractions, although here you can actually think of it as fractions, but try to think of it as weeks and days. So we're going to add the weeks together. So 28 plus 2 is going to give us 30 weeks. And then we're going to add the days. So 2/7 plus 2/7 is going to be 4/7, which is the same as 4 days in a week. So the postmenstrual age is 30 weeks and 7 days.
Okay, right. Now we got our postmenstrual age. So now we want to get our rate of weight gain.
Yep. We want to do our rate of weight gain. So to do that, we are going to subtract the previous, or rather the current weight
Minus the previous weight, right?
Yeah, so we're going to take this weight here and subtract it from this weight here.
Mm-hmm.
But I find it easier to do it in grams first. But remember that since this infant is still preterm, the normative data is still in grams per kilogram per day. Yes. So again, we're just going to do grams for the calculations, but then convert it to match the normative data. Mm-hmm. So I'm going to do this one first. So 1.26 kilograms is the same as 1260 grams, mm-hmm. minus the 1.09 kilograms, which is 1090 grams, which is equal to 170, I believe.
Let me double check. 1260 minus 1090, 170, yeah.
Perfect. Okay, so this was the amount of the change in weight gain, so that I guess the weight gain from the current date and the previous date. And let's take a look at what those dates are. So the current date is 5/19, the previous date is 5/22, and that is a span of 7 days. So mm-hmm. we know that this infant gained 170 grams.
So we'll divide it by 7.
In 7 days. So let's see, that will give us.
That gives us about 24.3.
24.3 grams per day. So that was the rate of weight gain for this infant. But like I said, we are doing grams per kilogram per day. So we're going to divide this by the weight of the infant in kilograms to get to that normative data. So we're going to do this value right here, divided by 1.26 kilograms, because that's the current weight. And that's going to give us a total rate of weight gain of approximately 19.3 grams per kilogram per day. Mm-hmm. And we're just going to round that down to 19 grams per kilogram per day. So let's just write that in here. There you go.
Okay.
Perfect. So all that is done. Let's move on to the next slide here.
All right. So here we have our laboratory values that were given to us for this case scenario. So we know that hemoglobin and hematocrit have everything to do with iron. And as Nick mentioned before, when we calculated our iron after we upped the volume to 150 milliliters per kilogram per day, we were within that range. It was a little bit on the lower end at 2.2. But here the labs are telling us that both the hemoglobin and the hematocrit are low. So this is going to be what warrants us to make specific recommendations to add on top of our vitamin D supplement. And I believe, what was it? It was vitamin
sodium.
D and the sodium supplement. So we're actually going to suggest an iron supplement as well, just because the labs are indicative of low iron, and you know, we don't want the babies to get anemic or iron deficient. That would be very bad.
Right. And if I'm not mistaken, I believe we didn't mention this before, but we would only add about 1 milligram per kilogram per day of iron to the supplement, because remember they were at 2.2. They needed between 2 to 3. So we don't want to add too much, just a little bit more, just to help to increase this hemoglobin and hematocrit levels to the appropriate levels.
It.
Yeah. Right, normalize it. And I just want to say something real quickly, that there are a lot more other lab values that we consider when we monitor these infants. We just didn't include them here for the sake of simplicity, but the rest of them were normalized. So these were the only ones that really needed our attention.
Exactly.
Okay. So let's go ahead.
All right, guys, now the moment you've all been waiting for. We're going to fill out our ADIME note. I know it can seem like a lot, but remember, again, our ADIME note is our legalized document that we use in as a clinical dietitian in the hospital. There can be different variations of ADIME notes, but the process is always the same. That's why it's called a standardized legal document. So first in our ADIME is our assessment. And mind you, this is just us filling in everything. We basically have already figured out all of our anthropometrics, all of our assessment. We assessed the advisable intake, the rate of weight gain. So we're just going to fill everything in here and use our normative data to help us estimate the actual goals that we want this baby to eventually get to.
Yeah. So let's start off on the left because we read from left to right. We are going to look at the biochemical data. And there are, like I said, a lot more pieces of biochemical data that can be and should be added here. But just for the sake of this module, we're just going to add in that hemoglobin and hematocrit, which we found to be very low. So the hemoglobin was at 14.9 okay. And the hematocrit was at 33.8%. Okay.
Definitely.
Yep. And then
then we have our current weight, which was at 1.26 kilograms.
And it was at the 24th percentile.
And a z-score of negative 0.72.
Previously,
then we had our previous goal.
Yeah, previously we were at 1.09, 22nd percentile.
Z-score of negative 0.78.
There you go.
All right.
And the rate of weight gain, we were at approximately 19 grams per kilogram per day. And we're doing per kilogram because that's just how the normative data is for infants of this age range. And now we need to figure out the goal rate of weight gain, which we did not necessarily touch on in this module here, but remember from the previous modules and remember from what, you're probably sick of us saying it at this point, but the normative data has this information for you. So if we took a look at the Ziegler chart, we would see that it's between 18 to 21 grams per kilogram per day. And Dr. Abel generally encourages us to include ranges instead of absolute numbers because it's very hard to just get 18 precisely every time. So go for a range, especially because they are growing at a quicker rate than any other age range that you can think of. So
definitely. And so from that chart too, Nick, what are our estimated calorie needs for a 1.26 kilogram infant?
Right, back to the normative data, of course, our calories were between 119 to 127. Our estimated protein needs were between 3.9 to 4. Oh, not kcal, I'm sorry.
Protein. Grams of protein
per day. And lastly, so those are the recommended, the estimated, the recommended values. But let's just jot down their actual values. And we'll start with a little bit. We're actually going to include a little bit more than what we have here. So first, let's start with the volume, just because that is important for other medical professionals that deal with this infant to know. So 150. This was what we decided upon. We figured this was better than the 120 when we compare the nutrients that they would be receiving with this volume. That was the volume. Then our kcals were 120. And our protein was at 4.
Okay.
All
right.
There you go. And we also want to include a few other micronutrients because we found that these were the ones that were sort of lacking. So we felt that they were important to include here. So we would include iron at 2.2 milligrams per kilogram per day. We include vitamin D at 216 units per day. And lastly, we would include the sodium, which was at about 2.3.
And that's milliequivalents.
per day. There you go. So this is a big chunk of the assessment. It's a lot of data that we either have or just recently found, but it is very important because we need to kind of compare this data to the next round. We have the previous weight here, and for the next ADA, we're going to take this information and use it as well.
Okay, guys, so this is always additionally a portion that's on our part of the assessment as well. However, in this case scenario, we don't have any indication for a physical exam and finding. We don't have any food and nutrition history because we don't have a history yet. And same thing with client history, we don't have a history. So for now, and for this case scenario that we are going over in this module, we're going to just put NA on all of these boxes because this information is not available for us.
So let's move on to the D part of the ADIME, which is our diagnosis.
Yes, the fun part. So this is where we actually have to use our nutrition diagnosis. I'm sure I don't have to reiterate it, but I think we all know we can never use an actual medical diagnosis. This is specifically the nutrition terminology that we use specific to the dietitians.
Yeah.
So,
and before we get into what the PES statement or the diagnosis would be for this infant, I just want to touch on what PES stands for. Yeah. So we have our problem, the etiology of the problem, etiology, and the signs and symptoms. So this is the way that you want to be phrasing your diagnoses whenever you write one of these PES statements, one of these diagnoses. So you want to state the problem related to the etiology as evidenced by your signs and symptoms. So with that, Janine, what is the diagnosis for this infant here?
Okay, so this one, it's basically going to be really the only thing that we know, which is that this baby's premature, they need increased nutrients. So we're going to do our problem as increased nutrient needs because that's our problem. That's what we're trying to fix nutritionally. Related to, which is the etiology. So what's causing the problem? Our baby's premature. So prematurity, related to prematurity. And then what are our signs and symptoms as evidenced by the need for nutrition support? So this baby is already on enteral nutrition, but is not meeting the goals. So they still require the nutrition support. So that's going to be our signs and symptoms.
Perfect. And of course, write these out. I'm just saving space, saving time. But yeah, this is a great diagnosis. Good job, Janine. Remember, like Janine said, it is the nutrition diagnosis, not the medical diagnosis. We're not going to fix their congestive heart failure. That is part of the medical diagnosis. This is the how we as dietitians are going to help this infant specifically. And this is it right here.
We have to remember what our goal is, and most of our goals are always in our assessment, which is our goal rate of weight gain, our estimated calorie needs, our estimated protein needs. That's what we're trying to improve here. So that's what we want to focus on our nutrition diagnosis. And then as we move on, our next portion is going to be probably the most important part. Everything's important, but this is going to be really the nitty-gritty of how we're going to fix it. So we've identified the issue, we've done the assessment, we've identified our nutrition diagnosis, and now we're going to make our intervention. So we basically made our formula. So first we're going to write out basically our nutrition prescription. That's how you always want to start out your intervention of your ADIME note. So we're going to put our estimated enteral nutrition, calorie and protein goals, which is going to be 150 you always start off with your volume, then your calories, then your protein. And remember, you always want to make sure that you actually put the type of formula that we're using. So we use Similac Special Care High Protein. Nice. At 24 kcals per ounce. Perfect.
Good.
And then we want to put our goal rate of weight gain. We're going to specify that again, which was at 18 to 21 grams per kilogram per day. And then we cannot forget our specific recommendations that we made based upon what we saw after calculating the Similac Special Care High Protein and after seeing the biochemical data that was given to us. So we're going to do our recommendations for sodium, our recommendations for iron, and our recommendations for vitamin D.
And one thing with the sodium supplement here, usually with adults, we think of sodium, we might think of too much sodium, could lead to hypertension or something like that. But sodium is a nutrient that is very important for growth, especially for infants of this this acuity, and just infants in general, I guess. And so we want to make sure they're getting enough of that. And generally, like we mentioned before, infants are going to typically outgrow the dose that we prescribe.
So we basically just want to like stay ahead of the curve.
Right. Yeah, without staying too ahead of the curve. We don't want to be too good.
Yeah.
So these supplements will provide the infant with the advisable intake for their body weight, and just kind of help this infant grow as they should be.
And also, if you guys want to get more information, especially on fluid and electrolytes, they're very, very, very important, not just sodium, but also phosphorus and phosphate and calcium, magnesium. So definitely go back to chapter 2 and reference those just to read up on them and their importance when assessing those type of labs as well.
I think it was module 3.
It was definitely module 3, but in the actual our textbook, I believe.
Okay.
I don't know. Yeah, I think it is chapter 2. It will say fluid and electrolytes. That's what it says.
Look for that.
Okay. Yeah.
So now that we have our intervention done, let's go on to M&E, which is monitoring and evaluation.
Mm-hmm. So remember that we did in module 3, we did go over the basic monitoring and evaluation for parenteral nutrition. However, in this case, remember that this is enteral nutrition. So we're going to be monitoring a little bit differently. So first and foremost, as always, we're always going to monitor the feeding tolerance with the nutrition support that's given. So whatever type of EN that this baby is on, whether it be a G tube or a nasogastric tube, wherever it's coming from. And then we're also going to monitor the growth velocity. So we're going to make sure that we are staying on top of the rate of weight gain that's normally done weekly, and then monitor the weight daily or, bi-daily. And then we're going to monitor the length, and head circumference weekly as well. Like we have mentioned time and time again, we definitely want to reference the labs.
Yeah, with those specific anthropometrics, this one and this one, the weight is generally done, every day or every other day. But the length and head circumference, which is like the measuring the board length, getting the infant to stretching out their legs and measuring their head to the feet. That's usually done once a week, generally on Monday, depending on the hospital, of course, but generally on Monday. So that's why they're done at different time periods.
Because it's just very difficult,
to measure that, to get them to lay flat, I guess. It's not
to get the poor
easy.
little baby to put on the board and to measure their little head. Yeah. It doesn't need to be done every day. So weekly will suffice.
Yeah.
And then, of course, monitor our metabolic and the electrolytes such as iron and protein and their bone status. So labs that are indicative of all 3 of those. And then the same with our laboratory monitoring every week, every other week, just to make sure that they're within the normal ranges. And I know the guys are like, oh, how do we know if it's in normal ranges? Normally in the hospital, whenever the labs are sent out, they're always given with the ranges. So do not worry. You do not need to memorize the normal ranges of all of these labs, because trust me, there are a lot of them. So you'll be given that. And then also Dr. Abel has it provided for us too, the actual, all the laboratory values and the normal ranges. So that's really it. I think we
Yeah,
are just about done.
I think so. Thank you for sticking with us. I
Yes.
know that there were a lot of units here. It could fry our brains a little,
Yeah.
speaking from experience, which I'm experiencing right
Yeah, it's
now.
a lot. It's a lot. It's a lot of math, and it can be a little bit overwhelming. And again, yeah, thank you so much for sticking with us. But remember that, it just keeps building and building and building. We're
Yeah.
always going to be using everything that we learned from module 1 throughout the rest of the course.
Yeah.
We're here for you. We wish you the most luck. If you still have any type of confusion, any type of questions, or any other concerns, make sure to reach out to Dr. Abel. She will always be here for you. She can set up a Zoom meeting with you and go more in depth should you need it. Or just feel free to replay this video over and over and over again.
And over. Make it into a podcast while you're in your car, whatever works. If you're just you like listening to our voices, we're here.
All right, guys. Well, thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.
Bye, everybody. Thank you very much.
Bye.